I believe that when we look at changing this world, there's no greater challenge the parents and educators face than looking at kids. And I share this not only because my parents are teachers, or not only because we're passionate, what we do is build schools for kids around the world, but especially because of a moment, a conversation, that for me forever shaped how I look at the world, and especially how I look at education. And that moment was when I was about 14 years old. And the phone rang at our home. And there's this very formal sounding voice on the other end of the phone, and this perfect British accent. This impeccably British individual said that he was calling on behalf of the office of His Holiness, the 14th Dalai Lama. Now, for those of you who may not know who the Dalai Lama is, the Dalai Lama is believed to be the reincarnated spiritual leader of people who originate from a region called Tibet. And he is seen as a living legend, quite literally. And the phone on the other end basically said that this was the Dalai Lama's people calling to speak to Craig Kielburger's people. And my mother, who answered the phone, thought this was pretty funny, because she's the closest thing I have to people. And she thought it was a prank call. So she assumed that in school, some teacher was teaching us about the Dalai Lama, and maybe one of my friends who started picking up the phone and making a mock British accent and call. Turns out it was the real Dalai Lama. And so I found myself at the age of 14 on the phone with His Holiness, being invited to a gathering of individuals, 30 of us, that they locked in a room together for a week. Now, there were philosophers and theologians and former heads of state, presidents, prime ministers, and they wanted someone to represent the young people of the world. The token young youth. And so I was invited to the gathering. And they locked us into a room, and they gave us one question for an entire week to discuss. And the question was, what is the greatest challenge facing our world today? And if you think about it, it's a fascinating question. Because there's so many answers. I'm sure if I posed the question, I looked at it to any of you, and said, if you had to pick one issue, what is the issue that you maybe learned from your teachers, or that you personally feel is the issue you have to change in this world? I'm sure hands would fly up, and I'm sure people would say, well, maybe it's hunger. We debated, we discussed, we just talked about peace and war and violence and lives lost to violence. But again, people live side by side peacefully. They do it in Oakville, they do it in Toronto. If we're willing to make the difficult choices, sometimes politically, sometimes religious, sometimes socially, we could live side by side peacefully. And this issue of will kept coming up, if we were willing to make those sacrifices, if we were willing to take action. And eventually this group concluded saying that the greatest single challenge facing our world today is, how do we create that will? How do you nurture that compassion? In fact, they summed it up by saying the greatest challenge is that we're raising a generation of passive bystanders. And what they meant by that is that the single greatest challenge is facing parents and teachers to nurture within young people compassion and empathy and a desire to help and serve and to see our common humanity in others. We live in a world where so often schools are focused just on that academic success, the reading, writing, arithmetic. One of the reasons why I love especially Montessori schools, but for that matter, any schools that push the boundaries of education, is to go beyond just the four walls of a classroom, to go beyond the rote style of learning, to recognize that school is about so much more than just that. For students, sometimes you say, well, I want to take action, I want to help, but I don't know where to begin. Share what you love to do for an issue you believe in. That's the equation to changing this world. How do we change the world when we face such huge issues out there? Where you find your gift issues. Everybody's good in something. When you share your gifts together, that's how you change the world. Put all of those gifts together. Well, that's how you go from that to this. In fact, what We Day is, and I know some of the students who have joined us, is a celebration of the fact that all of us change the world every day. We have to change it for the better.